Welcome to a tale that will leave you questioning the very reflections you see in the mirror. Have you ever felt like something was watching you from beyond the glass? Well, Megan's story will make you rethink what you think you know about mirrors. Before we start, tell us in the comments, which place are you watching from? We'd love to know. Megan had always wanted a place of her own. After years of cramped dorm rooms and noisy roommates, she finally found a cheap studio apartment near her university. It wasn't perfect. Peeling wallpaper, creaky floors, and a slightly eerie vibe. But it was hers. She set down her bags and exhaled. Home sweet home. The apartment was mostly empty, except for a few leftover pieces of furniture from the last tenant. A rusty coat rack, an old chair in the corner, and most notably, a large antique mirror propped against the wall. Megan frowned. The mirror was taller than her, framed in dark weathered wood. The glass had a slight distortion, like looking through old water. She hesitated. Did the last tenant forget this? But she shrugged it off. A mirror was a mirror. She'd move it later. That first night, Megan slept soundly, but something woke her up around 3 a.m. A faint sound, a whisper. She sat up, blinking against the darkness. Hello? Silence. She rubbed her eyes, glanced around the room. Nothing. But then her gaze landed on the mirror. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw something. A faint shadow moving in the reflection. She blinked. Her own reflection stared back at her. Nothing else. She sighed, shaking her head. Probably just my imagination. She pulled the covers over her head and forced herself back to sleep. But just before she drifted off, she heard it again. A faint, distant whisper. This time, it came from inside the mirror. By daylight, the night's unease felt silly. Megan told herself it was just her brain playing tricks. The mirror was old, probably warped from time. Still, something about it felt off. She decided to move it. Gripping the heavy frame, she dragged it across the room, propping it up against the opposite wall, facing away from her bed. Better, she muttered. But as she turned away, she felt it. A sensation, like someone watching her. She glanced over her shoulder. The mirror stood still, but her reflection wasn't facing the right way. Megan FaceTimed her best friend Rachel. Rachel grinned from her dorm room. So, how's the new place? Megan exhaled. Kinda creepy. The last tenant left this huge old mirror, and I swear it was messing with me last night. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Messing with you? You mean like haunted? Megan laughed. No, just... She hesitated. How did she explain it? Rachel smirked. Megs, don't tell me you moved into a haunted apartment. You'll end up in one of those urban legend TikToks. Megan rolled her eyes. It's not haunted, just weird. Rachel leaned closer to the camera. Weird how? Megan turned her phone toward the mirror. It's old, and sometimes I think I hear... She stopped. Rachel frowned. Megan. Megan's phone trembled slightly in her grip, because in the reflection, Rachel wasn't on the screen. The mirror showed Megan holding the phone, but the screen was blank. Rachel's voice crackled. Meg, you okay? You just froze. Megan quickly turned the camera back to herself, forcing a laugh. Yeah, sorry, must be bad Wi-Fi. But as they said their goodbyes, she couldn't shake the feeling. The mirror was lying to her. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it. The itching sensation of being watched. Finally, around 2:45 a.m., she sat up, heart pounding. She didn't want to look, but she did. The mirror was still. The apartment was silent. And yet, the longer she stared, the more she noticed something was off. Her reflection blinked too late. She stiffened. No. She waved her hand. Her reflection copied her, but just a fraction of a second behind. Her chest tightened, and then the reflection smiled. Megan hadn't moved. Her real lips were pressed together in terror, but in the glass, her reflection grinned, and then it whispered, "You're looking too long." What would you do in Megan's place? Would you face the reflection or run from it? Megan scrambled out of bed, knocking over a lamp. The mirror didn't shatter, but the reflection had returned to normal, or at least it pretended to. Megan grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror, covering it completely. Her heart was racing. This was real. She wasn't imagining it. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, dialing Rachel. Rachel answered, groggy. "Megan, what the hell? It's 3 in the morning. Megan cut her off. "Rachel, I need you to come over right now." Rachel arrived an hour later, wrapped in a hoodie, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Okay, start talking. What's going on?" Megan hesitated. How did she explain this without sounding insane? Finally, she said, "It's the mirror." Rachel sighed. "You called me here at 4 a.m. for a haunted mirror." Megan grabbed her by the wrist, dragging her inside. She pointed to the mirror, still covered. "Look at it." Rachel hesitated, then pulled off the blanket. The reflection stared back. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Megan, it's just a mirror." Megan's stomach twisted. She stepped forward, looking into the glass. Her reflection matched her perfectly. No delay, no smile. Rachel nudged her. "See? Nothing." Megan wanted to believe her, but then she noticed something. Rachel's reflection. It wasn't standing right. It was just a bit too far back, like it wasn't part of the same world. Megan's throat tightened. She turned to Rachel, whispering, "We need to leave. Now." Rachel frowned. "Megan, seriously, it's just..." They both froze, because Rachel hadn't spoken, but the reflection had. Megan and Rachel stood frozen, because Rachel hadn't spoken, but her reflection had. A cold wave of fear crashed over Megan. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Rachel swallowed hard. "Megan, what was that?" Megan's voice barely came out. "That wasn't you." Rachel took a step back. Her reflection didn't move. Then it smiled. Rachel's breath hitched. "Megan, it's not copying me." Megan grabbed her arm. "We need to go, now." They spun toward the door, but the room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. And then the mirror moved. Not the reflection, the actual mirror. It tilted forward slightly, as if something behind it was pressing against the glass. Rachel yanked the door handle. "It's locked." Megan turned back to the mirror. The reflection of the room was changing. It was warping, darkening. In the glass, their reflected selves weren't standing in the apartment anymore. The room in the mirror was somewhere else, a space that didn't exist, somewhere cold, somewhere empty. And in that darkened reflection, there was a third figure standing behind them. "You've been looking too long." Megan's chest tightened. Rachel whimpered. And then the lights went out. Megan couldn't see, but she could feel. Something was in the room with them. Rachel grabbed her hand. "Megan!" Then the whispering grew louder, like dozens of voices speaking at once, like they were surrounded. Megan turned toward the mirror. The dark reflection was shifting. Rachel's reflection was still there, but it wasn't Rachel anymore. Her eyes were too black. Her mouth curled into a wide, unnatural grin, and then it stepped forward, out of the mirror. Rachel screamed. Megan yanked her away, stumbling back. The thing that looked like Rachel turned its head sharply. Its body jerked in unnatural movements. Then it whispered, "This side is better." Megan grabbed the closest thing she could find, a chair, and threw it at the mirror. The moment it hit, the mirror shattered. The whispers stopped. The room was silent. Megan was breathing hard. Rachel was shaking. Megan, did that just... They turned to the floor. The mirror was in pieces. But in the shattered fragments, the reflections were still there, still moving, and they were smiling. By sunrise, Rachel had refused to stay a second longer. They packed their things, leaving the apartment without looking back. Megan called her landlord, making up some excuse about moving back home. But as she stood in the doorway, one final thought chilled her to the bone. The mirror had shattered, but she could still feel it, like the pieces were still watching her. Rachel stood by the car, arms crossed. "We're never talking about this again, right?" Megan nodded. "Right." They climbed in, starting the engine, and just before they drove off, Megan stole one last glance at the apartment window. Her stomach dropped. There, in the empty apartment, a figure stood. It was her reflection, still trapped inside the mirror. And just before Megan turned away, it raised a hand and waved. What happens when your reflection isn't quite your own? If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And let us know in the comments, would you ever trust your reflection? Get ready for a chilling tale of four friends whose seemingly ordinary road trip takes a very dark turn. But before we dive in, tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? We'd love to know. It was supposed to be a fun road trip. 4 friends, endless highways, and the open desert stretching out before them. The kind of trip where you roll down the windows, blast music, and forget the world exists. Yet somewhere along the way, they got lost. The GPS had stopped working miles ago, the road signs had disappeared, and all that remained was an empty stretch of highway cutting through the Nevada desert. Ethan, gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, muttered under his breath, "This doesn't make sense. We should have hit a town by now." Jessica, in the passenger seat, tapped her phone screen repeatedly. No signal. In the back seat, Melissa rubbed her eyes, a nervous tremor in her voice. "Maybe we took a wrong turn," Ryan scoffed, attempting to lighten the mood. "Or maybe Nevada just sucks." But then they saw it. A neon sign flickering weakly in the distance, barely visible against the dark. Silver Ridge Motel. Vacancy. It looked abandoned. The parking lot was empty. The building was worn, its paint peeling in long strips. The vacancy sign buzzed faintly, struggling to stay lit. Jessica frowned. This place looks sketchy as hell. Ethan sighed, exhaustion etched into his features. "Yeah, well, unless you want to sleep in the car, we don't have a choice." Ryan stretched, yawning. "Whatever. As long as there's a bed, I'm good." Melissa, however, shivered. She stared at the motel like it was staring back. "Guys, I don't think we should stay here." Jessica nodded. "Thank you. Finally, someone with common sense." But Ethan rubbed his face, his eyes bloodshot from hours of driving. "We don't have enough gas to keep going. Let's just crash here for a few hours. Leave at sunrise." Jessica exhaled sharply, uneasy. "I have a bad feeling about this." Ryan offered a casual grin. "Jess, you always have a bad feeling about everything." This time, Jessica didn't answer. The wind howled through the empty desert, whistling through the cracks in the motel's sagging sign. They had no choice. They pulled into the lot. What do you think? Should they trust their instincts and leave, or try to get some sleep in this eerie motel? Stepping outside, the air felt wrong. No distant cars, no insects, just silence. An overwhelming sense of isolation pressed down on them. Inside, The motel smelled of dust and something stale, something long forgotten. The lights flickered overhead as they approached the front desk. Behind the counter stood an old man, thin, almost skeletal. His deep-set eyes locked onto them without blinking. His voice was low and raspy, sending a chill through the group. "You kids need a room?" Something about him felt off, but exhaustion won out. Ethan hesitated. Yeah, 2 rooms, please." The old man slid 2 keys across the counter, his fingers ice cold against Ethan's. "Check out at dawn." Not a suggestion, a statement. Jessica's stomach twisted. Melissa whispered, "What does that mean?" The old man said nothing, and they didn't ask again. The rooms weren't much better. The wallpaper curled at the edges, revealing something dark beneath, and the mirrors were smudged, as though someone had pressed against them, watching. Melissa hugged herself. "This place gives me the creeps." Ryan laughed, tossing his bag onto the bed. "It's just old. Get over it." Jessica turned to Ethan, lowering her voice. "I really think we should leave." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, weariness clouding his expression. "Jess, we've been driving for hours. I can barely keep my eyes open." Jessica's jaw tightened. "Then I'll drive. I don't care. This place isn't right." Ryan scoffed. "Jesus, Jess, it's just a crappy motel. You're acting like we walked into a horror movie." Melissa glanced around, her voice trembling. "I don't know, Ryan. It's weirdly empty, like it's been abandoned for years." Ethan exhaled. "Let's just get some sleep. First thing in the morning, we're out of here." Jessica wanted to argue, but something told her it was already too late. That night, at 1:34 a.m., Jessica woke to the flicker of a TV turning on by itself. An old television in the corner hissed with static. Her stomach lurched. She fumbled for the remote, clicked it off. A tense silence followed until the bathroom door creaked open. Slowly, Jessica sat upright, pulse pounding. "Melissa?" No reply. The door swung wider in the darkness. Though the light was off, she could feel something staring back from inside the bathroom. Then, the knocking started. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on their door. Jessica's heart slammed against her ribs. A moment later, the knocking moved down the hall. One door, then another. Knock, knock, knock. Melissa whispered, "Don't open it." Jessica nodded, gripping the sheets. Then, the doorknob twisted with a metallic groan, as though something was pushing to get in. Melissa covered her mouth, stifling a scream. Suddenly it stopped. A whisper slipped through the air. "Let us in." Jessica and Melissa were paralyzed, the air in the room thick and suffocating. Jessica glanced at her phone. No signal. Melissa whispered shakily, "Do you think it's Ethan and Ryan?" Jessica shook her head. "Number, they would have said something." Then came another sound, the creak of footsteps, but not from the hallway. It came from somewhere within their room. Melissa sucked in a breath. "Jess, don't turn around." Jessica turned anyway. Her gaze landed on the mirror, and there she saw it. A shadow, tall and unnaturally thin, standing behind them in the reflection. But when she whipped around to see the actual room, nothing was there. If you saw a shadow only in the reflection, would you try to confront it, or run like Jessica and Melissa? Terrified, Jessica grabbed Melissa's wrist. "We need to get to Ethan and Ryan's room, now." The hallway seemed different, longer and darker. The wallpaper was peeling in jagged strips, revealing what looked like black mold or something worse beneath. The flickering overhead lights cast warped shadows, as if the building itself were alive. Each step felt heavier, as though the carpet were holding onto their ankles. They reached Ethan and Ryan's room. Jessica knocked once, twice. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. Melissa's voice shook. "Jess, what if they're not?" Jessica didn't let her finish. She banged on the door with her fist. "Ethan, Ryan, open up!" Silence. Then the door creaked open on its own, revealing a pitch-black interior. Jessica and Melissa hesitated in the doorway, hearts pounding. "Guys?" Jessica's voice echoed in the oppressive darkness. Flicking the light switch, Jessica squinted against the brief flicker of the bulb. The moment the room illuminated, a sick dread crept over her. The beds were empty, the sheets untouched, luggage gone. It was as if Ethan and Ryan had never been there at all. Melissa stumbled back. No, they were just here. Jessica's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of them. Her gaze landed on the mirror across from the beds, thick with dust. Undisturbed for decades, it seemed. Yet beneath the grime were distinct, fresh handprints, pressed from the inside, as if someone had been trying to break through the glass. Then, the TV flickered on, casting sporadic light across the room. Static hissed before revealing security footage of the motel's front desk, parking lot, and hallways. Jessica, Melissa, Ethan, and Ryan appeared, arriving earlier that night, then closing their room doors. After that, nothing. It was like they'd vanished. Melissa let out a sob. "Jessica, look." The footage changed, now showing Jessica and Melissa in this room, in real time, though there were no visible cameras. A wave of dread washed over them. They ran to the lobby, hearts pounding, only to find it empty. The guest book lay untouched under a thick layer of dust. Jessica spotted an old newspaper half buried beneath a fallen shelf. She pulled it free with shaking hands. The date, 1978. The headline, "Silver Ridge Motel burns to the ground. 4 travelers missing, never found." Melissa shook her head. "Number this can't be real." Jessica flipped the page, her eyes landing on a grainy photo of 4 missing travelers. Her vision blurred. It was them. Melissa, Jessica, Ethan, Ryan, 4 travelers who had checked in, but never checked out. A whisper caressed the air, sending chills down their spines. "You were always part of the motel." Jessica and Melissa spun around. The old man from the desk stood there, his appearance hideously altered, skin rotting, eyes black pits, mouth warped into an impossibly wide grin. The motel groaned, walls peeling like dead skin, the floor cracking to reveal something dark and pulsing beneath. They felt a pull, as though icy hands gripped their backs, dragging them down. Melissa screamed, while Jessica fought to cling to anything solid. But the motel was swallowing them whole. The last thing Jessica saw was her own reflection in the dusty lobby mirror, trapped behind the glass, her eyes wild with terror as the motel erased their existence, as though they had never been there at all. What really happened to them that night? Were they ever meant to leave? Some places don't just take visitors, they keep them. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done differently? Stay safe, and be careful where you stop for the night. Welcome to a story that will make you rethink the concept of childhood imagination. What happens when a child's imaginary friend becomes more than just a figment of imagination? Tonight's tale takes you inside a mother's nightmare as she discovers that some friendships are far from innocent. But before we begin, tell us in the comments, from where are you watching our horror tale? Let's dive in. Emma had always been a quiet, sweet girl. At just 6 years old, she had a calm demeanor, preferring her dolls and picture books over loud games or rambunctious play. Her mother, Julia, often marveled at how well-behaved Emma was, especially in the bustling household where Julia was often juggling her job and home life. But recently, Emma's behavior had taken a strange turn. It wasn't anything overt, just subtle things. Things that made Julia's heart race when she wasn't paying attention. One evening, while Julia was sorting through the laundry, Emma appeared in the doorway of the living room, staring intently at the floor. Julia glanced up from her work and smiled. "Hey, sweetheart. What's up?" Emma slowly looked up, her wide eyes almost blank. "I'm talking to my friend," she said, her voice flat, almost too calm for a child her age. Julia's smile faded. "Your friend? Who's that?" Emma simply pointed up at the ceiling. "My friend who lives in the room upstairs. He talks to me sometimes. He's nice." Julia's stomach tightened. The upstairs room had always been off limits to Emma. It was an old room, dusty and locked. Julia hadn't been able to bring herself to clear out the boxes of old belongings that had been left by the previous owners of the house. She hadn't even told Emma that the room was locked. "Sweetheart," Julia started gently, "there's no one in that room. It's just an old storage room." Emma nodded slowly, but Julia could tell that her daughter didn't believe her. "He says he's not an old storage room," Emma replied cryptically. "He says he's waiting for someone." Julia's heart skipped a beat. She set the laundry down and knelt beside her daughter. "What do you mean? Who's waiting for someone?" But Emma just shrugged and wandered back toward the hallway. Julia watched her go, a cold shiver creeping up her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but she brushed it aside as a child's imagination. Still, she couldn't help but glance at the locked door at the top of the stairs. Do you think Emma is just imagining things, or is there something more to her friend? That night, after tucking Emma into bed, Julia lay awake in her own room, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about Emma's words. "He says he's waiting for someone." The chill in her daughter's voice haunted Julia, and she couldn't shake the thought of the old room upstairs. She had never really thought much about the house before they moved in. It was quaint, peaceful. But as the days passed, little things seemed off. The creaks in the floorboards, the way the lights flickered every now and then, and Emma's fixation on that room upstairs. Julia couldn't sleep. The more she thought about it, the more the unease settled in her chest. She finally decided she couldn't take it anymore. She got up and padded softly into the hallway. She crept toward the stairs, her footsteps making no sound on the old wooden floors. The door to the upstairs room loomed ahead, old, heavy, with peeling paint. She reached for the doorknob, hesitating. It felt cold against her palm, but she turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dim room filled with shadows. The air smelled musty, like dust and old wood. She stepped inside and flicked on the light. The room was empty except for a few old, dusty boxes stacked against the walls. Nothing unusual, but as her eyes scanned the room, she saw it. A faded photograph on the far wall, tucked into a forgotten corner. The frame was cracked and the image was blurred with age, but one figure stood out clearly, a woman with dark, hollow eyes, standing in the exact spot where the door now stood. Julia shivered. Who was she? Julia stepped closer to the photograph, her heart racing. The woman's face was unmistakable. Her features were too vivid, too present, but she didn't recognize her. As she stared at the photograph, Julia heard something, a faint rustling behind her. She whipped around, but the room was empty. Do you think the photograph holds some kind of clue, or is Julia just overthinking it? The following days were uneventful, but Emma's behavior grew more peculiar. She began spending a lot of time by the door to the upstairs room, sitting there for hours, talking softly to herself. Julia couldn't make out the words, but she noticed Emma's expression was serious, even distant. One afternoon, after seeing Emma sitting by the door again, Julia approached her. "Sweetheart," Julia said gently, "who are you talking to?" Emma didn't answer at first. She just looked at the door, then back at her mother with an unreadable expression. "He's lonely," she said quietly. "He wants me to play with him." Julia's chest tightened. "Emma, you know that room is off limits. You're not allowed in there, okay?" But Emma didn't respond. She simply stood up and walked past Julia without a word, her eyes staring blankly ahead. Later that evening, when Julia was cleaning up after dinner, she heard a voice from upstairs. It was faint, but she could hear it clear as day. A woman's voice, calling out softly. At first, Julia thought it was Emma, but when she called upstairs to her daughter, there was no answer. Panicked, Julia rushed to the stairs and shouted Emma's name. The voice continued, "Come up here, sweetie. I'm waiting for you." Julia's breath caught in her throat. The voice wasn't Emma's. It was soft, coaxing, almost pleading. It wasn't until Julia reached the bottom of the stairs that she realized something horrifying. She had never heard that voice before. It was too eerie, too familiar. She stormed up the stairs, her heart pounding. She reached the top and paused at the door to the room. She had to know what was going on. She had to stop whatever this was before it got worse. Julia flung open the door, her eyes scanning the room quickly, but it was empty. No one was there. The voice had stopped the moment she opened the door, leaving her in the unsettling silence of the old room. Her heart was racing as she stepped further into the room. The smell of stale air hit her hard. But then, there it was again. The photograph. She felt drawn to it once more. Julia reached for the frame and picked it up. As she did, a piece of paper fell from the back of the photo. She unfolded it carefully, her hands trembling. It was an old letter, dated from decades ago. Julia read the letter in disbelief. It was from the previous homeowner, a woman named Margaret, who had written to a friend about her troubled daughter. "I fear she's talking to someone I can't see," the letter read. "I'm afraid of what she might be hearing. I don't know how much longer we'll stay here." Julia's blood ran cold as she read further. "There is a room upstairs where the past lives, a place where souls linger and wait for something they lost." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. Julia's mind raced as the door slammed, locking her inside the room. She felt the walls closing in. The letter in her hands felt like an omen. She wasn't alone in the room. The voice, the one she had heard earlier, was getting louder, growing clearer. It was coming from the walls, from the corners. A whisper, a plea. "Help me. Help me." Her heart pounded in her chest. She turned toward the source of the voice. It was no longer a whisper. It was a shrill, urgent cry. She stepped forward, her hands reaching for the wall. Suddenly, Emma appeared in the doorway. "Mom, you shouldn't be here." Julia turned sharply. Her daughter was standing in the doorway, but her face was different. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. She looked empty. "Emma, what's happening?" Julia rushed toward her, but Emma stepped back. "The friend is waiting. He says you're taking too long." Julia's breath caught in her throat. The child she had raised, her precious daughter, was no longer the same. Something had changed. She wasn't just speaking of an imaginary friend. She was being controlled by the spirit of Margaret, the woman from the letter, whose unfinished business had cursed this house. The walls creaked, the air grew thick, and Julia could feel the chill from the spirit closing in. Before she could react, the lights flickered, and she felt a cold hand brush her shoulder. "Goodbye, Julia," came a soft voice behind her. She turned around and saw the reflection of Margaret's face in the mirror. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. and let us know in the comments. What do you think would happen if you were trapped with a spirit in your own home?